that shape how we think, feel, and act. So we want to believe it. Third, images are vivid and concrete. They're colorful. Claritin allergy medication uses the slogan, "Nothing but blue skies from now on," to illustrate the relief offered by its formula. Images are also simplified. That is, the images provide us with only a small amount of total knowledge available about individual company. And then finally, they're ambiguous. They can serve multiple and unforeseen purposes. They're open for interpretation. They have the image of Obama's logo from back in the day. Okay, and then you can do the internet activity if you want to. I've got some examples here. The Hillary Clinton. I'm stupid. The Hillary Clinton thing. So, it's synthetic. It was crafted. But what does it actually say? What is it? Is it looking forward? Moving forward. Is the H moving? But the idea, I think, is moving forward. That would be my guess. Is it believable? I don't know. They try to make it, it's just a little visual here, but it depends on your perspective. Hillary Clinton is believably going to try to move us forward, whatever that forward is. I guess it's vivid and concrete. It has colors, has good colors. Red, white, and blue. It's obviously simplified because it doesn't really say anything except H forward. I mean, we have to know this in the first place to know it's even a political thing for Hillary Clinton. So, ambiguous, obviously, yes. So. But I also found these things here about various other rejected Hillary Clintons. Back to the Future, I guess back to Bill Clinton. I don't know about Hillary's. The Nike swoosh, just do it. She's inevitable anyway. Lack of change you can believe. I don't know. But in any case, theoretically, conceptually, when you're thinking about images, it's always sort of important to think about these characteristics. Now, I think this stuff, the next things are perhaps the most important things to think about when we're thinking about this particular chapter. The effects of images on audiences. They have effects. Obviously, we can try to be critical, but cognitive, emotional, behavioral effects. And so one of the big things that we think about here, they talk a little bit about cognitive dissonance. There's a lot of stuff about cognitive dissonance in here. But in a sense, I boil it down all to emotion. Oftentimes, if we like the image of the source, whatever, we think it's realistic, we have an emotional bond with that source, with that company, and we become to identify with that image. And remember that identification is extremely important. So it also boils down to, when you're building this image, whatever that image is, do audience think that image is a credible image and believable and all that, and does it stir my emotion, and do I identify with it? Do I identify with that Hillary thing moving forward? Do I like something that moves forward? Do I want to move to the future? Do I want to go to the past? Yeah, I don't want to move to the past, because in my mind, past is all about bad stuff, not necessarily. Moving forward. Make America great again, which is sort of the opposite, right? It's not great now. We're sort of about the future, but let's go back to old values and everything like that. But people have an emotional response. Identify with these ideas or these images. Yeah, I want to make America great again. Creating images. So images have. It talks about message shaping and composition. Obviously, you want to figure out what's your big idea. Really, what image do you want? I'm starting a new company in Charleston that it's a new one of these carriage rides, but it's no, not horses. It's zebras. So I make that choice. What message do I want to come across? Maybe you're united with different stripes. I don't know. But you know, but you gotta think, what's the big idea? What image or what idea are you trying to get out? And then it gives, throughout this discussion, starting on the bottom of page 248, they talk about the Tea Party, and that's a pretty good example. Message salience. Remember, once you got an idea, whatever it is, you want it out there. Message salience is all about saturating the media with your image, with your message. Through repetition, repetition, repetition. You want to get attention. So that's another part of creating an image. Get it out there. A third part is message credibility. I say too legit to quit. So basically, persuaders portray their messages in the company of other symbols that the audience believes to be credible. The Tea Party movement quickly added noted politicians and a few that were unknown to its ranks in order to make the movement more credible. People have spokespersons and all that type of stuff. So, but you want your message and you want your image to be credible. Good, credible people and other institutions support or endorse this thing. The final thing is this idea of framing. That obviously what we're doing here is, we've talked about framing all the time. It's simply creating, repeating, and supporting a message. Well, it's not enough to ensure its success. The news is not just an information, a storytelling process. Persuaders tell stories in order to build their image, stories that have common themes that can be easily and quickly understood. So you got to sort of frame it through story, they say. And so that's another thing. We've talked about this before. Narratives is really, really important. How you frame your message, and the Tea Party did that pretty well. So Trump, I mean, you know, here's another thing that you could think about. I mean, what message or composition, you know, what's the big idea here? You know, make America great. Everything's terrible right now, and it's going to be even more terrible if we elect Hillary Clinton. Getting that message out everywhere, repetition. Is it credible? That's one thing he's having difficulty with, because a lot of folks that we see as credible Republicans won't come to his side. And so, for instance, we see at the convention, the former Republican presidents are not going to be there. The only candidate, Dole, I think, is going to be there. And he's got lined up like sports heroes and various other folks. But he's having some difficulty with that, even though a lot of people obviously believe his idea. And framing, I mean, they tell a lot of stories about, you know, how good he is at negotiating and all that type of stuff, and building walls and all that type of stuff. So you can sort of see how Trump and others, I mean, obviously, are going through this process of creating a sort of image. And there's also just this image of him as brash and sort of, you know, says what he wants and to the hell with everybody else. And a lot of people dig that. And so, yeah. Okay, media and images. Remember that, you know, we're not always in complete, as persuaders, we're not always in complete control of our messages, right? Media sort of takes over. Remember the agenda setting stuff and all that jazz? So we need to be very, very thoughtful about that. So the idea here is that obviously news covers certain stuff. What's the main thing that they're covering about yesterday's convention? You know, it's mainly Trump's wife is charged with plagiarism, taking lots of different sentences verbatim from Michelle Obama's 2008 convention speech. Is it plagiarism? Yeah, undeniably. They might have not meant it. One of the things that I teach in all my classes, even if you didn't mean to do it, you still did it. If you tipped a cow but didn't mean to, you still tipped the cow. but it's crazy stuff. But they love that stuff. News loves stuff like that. If somebody screws up like that, they love it, and so they're going to cover certain things. Reports pick images, visuals to use, so we don't control what the visuals they're going to use, and oftentimes they try to give visuals that are going to make us or people look bad. I don't know. They use stock images sometimes, or old images. Media often stick with the same story and over again because they don't know. But you know, you might want to take a look at that. But the big picture here is that even as persuaders, if I'm working for a political consulting firm and I'm in the process of we got to build an image for my candidate, you know, here's all these ideas, but at the end of the day, you know, we have to do our best to try to control the image, but media is going to do certain things. We just have to sort of fight back against that. So that's important to remember, that we're not completely in charge of it. So oftentimes we have to think very strategically about how media portrays us and people, and we want the media to like us. Now, there's always competing meanings, right? There is no one set meaning. This image means this. Everything is always in competition. So we have cognitive dissonance again. You know, which source, you know, if we have controversy over something, you know, what is the, what do we stick to? So in times of uncertainty, what some people argue here, Bennett, is that, like, you know, did Trump plagiarize? You know, maybe you really like Trump, so in times of certainty you clean to old images. Well, she was an immigrant, she was so I didn't, you know. The truth is ambiguous. It was just sort of the same thing. We hold on to an old image. So we tend to hold on to the old, whatever that thing is, if there's more old to hold on to. So people oftentimes they set their mind, you know, I like this, and they tend not, I like this image, and they tend not to change their minds. It depends on the situation. I mean, obviously, if somebody comes out as a, you know, pedophile, hopefully folks would change their minds. But sometimes, okay. So the meaning, though, is always sort of up for grabs. Evaluating images, this is important. We need to be very critical of images because folks can easily manipulate. Images are so easily manipulated, particularly in the media age. You can see at the beginning of this chapter how critical they are of images in the media age, and how it's different from ethos and all that type of stuff. Images deny us important information. Obviously, we can't sit down and have a discussion with folks. You know. And so here's the ways to be critical. I like this. Avoid prejudging the source. That's good. Understand the influence of the media, how it impacts, just as we talked about. Seek information about sources from a variety of media. That's very important. Just don't focus on one media source, like one news source. Read tons of stuff. Okay. So, image source is super cool and important, right? That's something to consider when we're thinking about the larger idea of persuasion generally. Institutional sources, also very important. Everything that we've talked about is sort of the same, can't really see that, but for institutional sources, right? And so institutional sources are different from individual sources because they are institutions, not individuals, right? Okay, for those sometimes there's. But in any case, this is what it says. Organizational image different from individual image. Images are more temporary than a related concept identity. An organization develops its identity through a great deal of thought and research. An organization's image is more transient than its identity and is often somewhat controlled by the organization, blah, blah, blah. Basically, it's how we form images of large organizations and institutions. So, like a company. That's it. But it's different from like an individual person identity. It's because it's about an organization. An organization image is also different from a brand image. It's not the same thing as a brand image. A brand image applies to a particular product or service.